Today on the cast, Retro and I are talking about power couples, and no, not Kimye or Brangelina. This is a gaming podcast after all. From the recent Bethesda acquisition by Microsoft all the way back to when Sony and Nintendo almost walked hand in hand into the sunset, there have been some strange partnerships in gaming. Ones we wish made it, others that thrive today, and some we wish never happened at all. Retro, how's it going?
How's it going, man?
It's pretty good. Pretty good. Had a good week. What about you?
Man, I'm here. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. Anything interesting going on? I know adventures in modding has been cooling down since everybody's gotten their Unhinged and
they're trying to get it together, man. I'm still trying to get mine together. I'm still trying to get two together, but you know.
Yeah. It's proven from what I've seen, it's proven to have been a harder mod than
expected.
Yeah. But all projects are. I think we all have experienced something that we went in and were like, it'll be easy, and then kind of grit our teeth at the real work that has to get put in.
Oh man. Yeah, I have to get new magnet wires because the ones that I have are too small and I can't seem to cut them to be able to solder them to the board. So I have to get new ones that aren't as small.
I had a similar problem with wire that's too thick on DMG mod, but you know, it's a learning process.
Yeah, it's a learning process. Enjoy.
Someone mentioned in the open, Bethesda pulled the trigger by joining up with Microsoft, and the big news for that, already 20 games are on Game Pass, including all the Dooms, even Doom 64. It's funny to say a N64 game can now be played on your PC if it wasn't beforehand. But a lot of really good catalog items just right out of the gate being included.
Which of those are you playing?
Well, I kind of dropped Game Pass because there's too many games, Retro. There's too many new games, too many old games, too many good games to be played, and not enough time to play them, especially being dads that we are.
That's fair. I don't have an Xbox, so I have Game Pass because of Discord, and I've been waiting to give that to someone, but I haven't found them. Dear listener, if you're listening and you don't have Game Pass and you like to get Game Pass, get in touch with me.
Yeah. Well, the really cool thing about Game Pass is they're starting to be available on mobile. So as soon as, I know we were talking before we started, you have an iPhone. As soon as Apple works out whatever problem they have with streaming services,
I can get Xbox on my iPhone?
Eventually. They're being pains in the butts about it. Microsoft wants it to happen, but Apple's been a little wary. You could also, if you have a PC good enough to play it, I mean, you could download the client and get the games there.
I have too many other games to play that I wouldn't bother doing that.
Yeah, back to the age old too many good games to play.
Exactly.
But another kind of not so great thing that comes about, like partnerships and acquisitions, is the swing that more, if not all, Bethesda titles are going to be PC and or Microsoft exclusive, which makes PS5 owners grit their teeth a little bit.
As expected, right?
Yeah. I mean, with
part of the game.
part of the business, as it were. But Microsoft isn't a stranger to buying companies that have really good IPs attached to them. A while back, post N64 era, Rare was picked up by Microsoft, and from coming off of that era, having like GoldenEye and Banjo Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day, Diddy Kong Racing.
I enjoyed Perfect Dark on the Xbox 360 when I lived with a gentleman who owned an Xbox 360, and him and I would have plenty of matches that way. I wouldn't have played it otherwise. So it was a great experience.
So that, and there was a game called Cameo that was a action platformer where you played as an elf that could transform into various elemental creatures with various powers. Those two were going to be mid-late cycle Xbox original titles that they then pivoted to be launch titles for the 360, and they did well.
Same. I think the same. I wouldn't have played it if it wasn't for the Xbox 360 and my good roommate who had one.
Yeah, watching some of the I like to research before we go on with the topic. I don't like being caught with my pants down. But seeing, I remember playing Cameo. I think I used to have it, believe it or not. But I didn't know that the Perfect Dark game existed, and they tested out a lot of the achievement systems and the shooter systems that proliferated throughout other shooter titles from the 360 era. Kind of Rare set the standard along with Halo for those achievements and kind of that type of gameplay on the system. But not all sunshine and roses from Microsoft acquiring Rare, though.
Tell me more.
So they became known as creating like avatar items for Xbox Live, and then they did a long string of Kinect games in between the 360 era, and then coming into the Xbox One and PC era, they kind of got greenlit or got given the Sea of Thieves project, which has proven to be like very popular on the platform. I played it myself. Unfortunately, there's a lot of like PvP aspects to that game. It's not Sea of Friends, it's Sea of Thieves. So PvP can sometimes be aggravating from my side, because I get mad because I'm bad at video games.
Fair.
Yeah.
I don't play PvP games, so that, I mean, it's understood as far as my world goes that I'm not that good at my games. So I'm good at Pokemon. That's why I play Pokemon so much. But you can only play so much Pokemon before you get tired of it.
Yeah. It's a shame that's the same game over and over again, though. It's a thing that
See, and that's the thing. I would always speedrun that game so that I can get to the meat of the game, as it were, and the post-game content, and specifically training your Pokemon so that you can play other people. So you specifically would breed your Pokemon so that they would make the special moves that you would need to annihilate your opponent when they didn't expect your Pokemon to know this specific move. None of the characters inside the game would understand that. Like they always have the one select attack, but other human players, given the same type of strategy building and team building, some of the really competitive players, they know so many specific mathematic equations to know, like, oh, well, your Pokemon, if it knows this specific move, well, it can destroy me. But if it doesn't have that specific move, I have one shot to be able to get him down to where I can annihilate him next turn.
I did not know it went that deep.
It goes deep, man. I had to step back because it was too deep.
I never really got into like a community that played through the proper titles. So in my small town high school, there was like maybe one or two kids, and we didn't have a link cable among us to do real like trading or fighting. A auto YouTuber I watched called Hoovy's Garage, and he has a fleet of very nice but at sometimes very broken cars, and he's like, his rule is you leave one thing broken in your car and nothing else will break, because when you have everything fixed, something else is going to go. So he has like all sorts of cars, and just one little thing, he's like, let's just leave this broken, and the car will drive forever. But that's another really funny YouTube channel. If we have any car guys or gals.
Speaking of Nintendo,
yes,
how about that Nintendo Philips and Nintendo Sony thing?
Yes.
Where do you want to go with that?
So I think the Sony Nintendo, like the idea of that story is pretty common knowledge. Back in the Super Nintendo era, Eames, you could fill me in, because that's kind of the retro is in
My
your name.
niche, yeah.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Sega CD was out. Cartridges were really expensive to make. And really expensive for the consumer
and the developer.
Yep. So Sony, Nintendo approached Sony, or Sony approached Nintendo?
First way.
Yeah.
The first. So there was the gentleman who did the soundboard for the Super Nintendo, and forgive me, dear listener, if you're more knowledgeable than me, I forgot his name. This gentleman, he was watching his daughter play a Famicom system, which is the NES for us American listeners. And that's when he had the epiphany that this is more than just cheap entertainment. This is something to look out for, specifically for their computer and appliance pursuit and making different machines to the consumer.
So he looked at his daughter playing NES, and he saw that and was like, this isn't going to be Atari all over again.
Exactly. He saw that Nintendo had a grasp and a very intentional hold on how the software comes out, and that, there's some flaws to that specific way of thinking. We can talk about that later. But he started doing a project for Nintendo, and he wanted to do a soundboard, and he did the soundboard, and he was hoping to get his higher ups to approve it after he worked on it. It turned out that Nintendo reached out to him, and they reached out to them, and were trying to get them on board with the CD-ROM medium, because Nintendo saw the value in CD-ROMs as opposed to cartridges being only able to fit so much, and CD-ROMs able to fit a lot more, so a lot more content, a lot more ease of use for the developers. So they started partnering in that, and it was only a matter of time. There's two camps. There's the Nintendo fanboys, and then there's the PlayStation, Sony fanboys, and they'll argue with each other, saying, "Well, Nintendo went back behind Sony's back and stabbed them in the back," with that story of how at the infamous Expo, Sony revealed to the world that they're going to be partnering with Nintendo, but in the background, Sony was in their contract was going to have full control of the IP royalties for whatever goes on those CDs, and Nintendo didn't like that, and Nintendo went back behind Sony's back and got their rival to partner with, which was Philips at the time, and the European brand.
Yeah, that's isn't that a big no-no?
Well, in Japanese culture is a very big no-no, yeah. So Yamaguchi-san was the current president at the time, and a lot of companies were very upset with him. Capcom and several other Squaresoft. And,
Square.
Yeah, Square. And it was just a big a lot of the mass exodus for third-party developers to leave Nintendo's platforms. And it, in some ways, I feel that it benefited us as consumers. That they had their struggles with themselves, but because of the struggles that they went through, we got some amazing titles, not only on the Super Nintendo after Sony left, but on the 64, which was kind of Nintendo's going solo with like Super Mario 64, Zelda, and even Sony, and creating their first console. It was an epic console. They had amazing titles on it. Some of the best games I've ever played were on the first PlayStation.
Kind of what it highlights is Nintendo had to double down on like the quality of their first party offerings, because they didn't have like a foundation of third party that they could leverage. And even the partnerships that they had, like for, Super Mario RPG on the SNES, like they didn't have Square to leverage like their expertise in, RPG making. So if that went another way, we might not have gotten the Paper Mario that we have now. So it kind of worked out for us, because on the PlayStation side, we got, Final Fantasy VII, we got Chrono Cross late. Capcom brought us like Resident Evil.
A lot of JRPG companies like Alterus. No, what is it? Atlas. Yeah, Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
It took my attention away from the Game Boy Color. So I missed the Game Boy Color almost entirely if it wasn't for some ports and remakes, because of the PlayStation and all the JRPGs. And it was just the perfect time for me growing up in high school with not having that much responsibility and being able to just consume and dive into these 60 to 120 hour games, because of not only did they have multiple discs that were easier to afford than big cartridges, and the people who develop for those games, they spent the time, because it's easier to develop on CDs at the time.
Yeah, because you didn't have like the just dollars and cents limitations. Like, could you imagine? So a CD could hold 700 meg of data. Final Fantasy VII is 3 discs, so we're looking at like like at most
2.1 gigabytes.
2.1 gig. Could you imagine a cartridge that would hold that game?
I
Like
have a cartridge here, but it's really tiny. It's a Switch cartridge.
Yeah.
But they weren't available at the time.
No, SD was even a glimmer in someone's eye, or it was like super expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that cartridge would have been astronomical. And the assets on it, we wouldn't have had like the soundtracks that we have in those games, or like the varied soundtracks just from sheer volume.
So Sony PlayStation like hit me like, what is it called whenever you're driving and someone like hits you blindsided me whenever it released. My neighbor actually had it. I had a Nintendo 64 with a huge library of games that all my neighbors would come over and we'd multiplayer with. But another neighbor had the PlayStation and they were showing it to me, and some of the games on it were something like I've never experienced before because of how quality the music was. Parappa the Rapper, that was a fun game. You know, like they showed me the demo of that, and I'm like, we have to get the real game. We have to get the whole game.
You may or may not know, I think that was Studio Japan, and I think recently Sony announced that they were like stopping production of games in their Japanese studios. So sad to know that great stuff like that came from those studios, and now
it makes me want to play those old games more. I'd pick up a PlayStation 1 just so I can play that game now.
I have one sitting in a closet. I don't know what state it's in, though.
I'll trade you for the GBA.
We'll think about it. It might cost more to ship than either of them are worth, though. But yeah, the Philips CDI is probably one of those partnerships we would probably wish to forget.
Oh man. And Nintendo gave access to Philips for their IP, so they made terrible Mario games, terrible Zelda games, and everyone makes fun of them. Like, you see them all over Discord. Their little icons are the funny looking Zelda and Mario clips from it.
Yeah, it's the like overly animated, like high motion. It was very much kind of like
Ren and
when
Stimpy.
FMV came out. It
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
It reminded me of Ren and Stimpy.
Very much like, yeah, very much like what we could do with this technology kind of thing. And like,
Exactly.
don't do that.
No. And from those videos that you and I shared with each other, or I shared with you, the CDI was really expensive. It was like $700 for a console, and the software was very expensive too.
Yeah, truly a foray for that company that didn't really know what they were doing. They just were like, we have this contract with Nintendo. We need to make as much money as we possibly can with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was funny, talking about the GBA, it reminded me, reading up about the Rare thing. Did you know that Rare was making video games for Nintendo consoles while it was bought by Microsoft?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So Banjo and Kazooie Grunty's Revenge on
the GBA.
Yes, was actually a game that was developed while they were in a first-party Microsoft studio. It was when they got signed on, Rare negotiated that they could still make titles for Nintendo, but only for the handheld market. So there's
Are those games any good?
I'm not sure. Like I played like some of Grunty's Revenge, and like that holds up as like you play it and you're like, yeah, this is handheld Banjo Kazooie.
Okay.
But like most games that I've picked up and played, like that was when I was testing out the Retro Pocket 2.
Yeah.
Um, just to see what it would do, and I was like, "Yeah, this is a Banjo Kazooie game in my hands. All right, let's see if this device can do X." Um,
The real Banjo Kazooie.
yeah, unfortunately, not as well as I wanted it to, or else I would still have it. And that's a tale for another day. But yeah, it's interesting, these partnerships that happen in the games industry, and ones that continue to happen back and forth. Microsoft and Bethesda,
Tell
um,
us.
so, Sony and Sony and Media Molecule. I can't remember if Media Molecule was first party at this point, or actually no. A better story is Sony and Insomniac. They Sony did a lot of second party, is
That's
what
Tony
they
Hawk, right?
referred to. Insomniac is Ratchet and Clank.
Okay.
Yeah. So during I think it really started in the PS3 era. They had like second party programs where they would pub fund games or get really close with developers to fund games and just be like, hey, we'll own the IP and you can develop it. So they went to Insomniac and they developed Ratchet and Clank, Resistance Fall of Man. Those two were like, I mean, Ratchet and Clank stands on its own. Well, that was PS2 era into PS3. That they were having that working relationship. Sony had really close relationships with Insomniac and Media Molecule throughout the PS2 for Insomniac and PS3 for Media Molecule, making like Little Big Planet. And I think recently Sony went ahead and purchased Insomniac. They had after PS3 they did Insomniac did Sunset Overdrive for the Xbox. That was the Xbox One exclusive at launch. It did okay. But I think Sony brought them into the fold. And like a lot of at this point, it's not so much like companies taking chances on hardware, because hardware at this point is just a box that sits in the living room, and like there's really not much innovation that's left to had in that box at this point. That they're all like,
Unless your current gen is a handheld.
yeah. At that point it's just a phone. Like you're either looking at like trying to get everything done with your phone, which mileage may vary there, or you're trying to find this unicorn device that could do everything in your hand. One day, the Aya Neos and the GPD wins of the world get very close, but there's.
Hey, did you see the new developer interview with Taki and the developer of the?
Aya Neo?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I saw you drop that and I was meaning to take a look at that. But the Neo to me is like a really interesting device, because it takes like there on the PC side of things, like there's still the war going on with like AMD and Intel. And AMD has been doing really, really good lately. So the Neo to me like looks very interesting because it's like an AMD handheld. And it does well. It does some things better than the GPD can do, and then it does some things worse, which that's trade-offs with any head-to-head comparison. But even though those can do, like, from an emulation standpoint, really most anything we would want it to do, like the trade-off is it actually being handheld for a long period of time. So like that, I think Taki, like his golden rule is like it needs to at least do 2 hours, or I'm not even going to consider it as anything.
That's fair.
which is a good benchmark. It's a decent benchmark to have. I would want mine to go a little longer because I would want to like sit it down and let it sleep for a little bit, or
Fair
if
enough.
something has like 4 hours of battery life, it means it could sit idle for, at least a day and not be completely dead.
That was my Switch when I used to take it out to the world and play it every now and then.
Wait, you went to go outside's a thing?
Yeah, I would take my Switch outside. It would be my work companion, actually. I busted out during my breaks and stuff to play
Nice.
Splatoon.
That's a neat little system. Like, so funny story. I actually got my Switch for a Father's Day present like 3 years ago.
Cheers.
That didn't actually happen though, because my son has played it far more hours than I have actually touched it. So
Clever.
that's that
Clever
dad life.
kids. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was a good Father's Day present. Can't believe I can't believe the Switch is that old.
4 years old, man.
Yeah, and they're like, I can't like spit without hitting an article saying that like a Switch Pro is coming, or a new Switch, or a Switch U, or whatever they're gonna poorly brand it.
The new Switch, the new Nintendo Switch XL Pro. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm down. I'm down for whatever they do. Will I get it? Probably not. But I'm down for whatever innovation they'll do. Maybe I'll be able to trade my old stuff for whatever new stuff. Except I'm not going to switch my Nintendo Switch. My Switch is going to stay here. I learned my lesson all these years. I had to spend so much time and effort and funds to get my old consoles back that I'm never going to switch the Switch that I have now. Not mentioning that it's hackable, because mine's not hacked. But yeah, I'm down for whatever they try to do. It could be. That's the thing. Yeah. Once I get to be able to play a different Splatoon game, or something happens where my Splatoon save is able to be accessible somewhere else, then I'm gonna hack that thing and see what I can do with it.
So in my recent time of like getting to know Retro and the other guys in the Discord, like the concept of like collecting has been brought upon me, and pretty much it's just like we're all just like kicking ourselves for getting rid of the things, just being like, baby, come back to me, just trying to get all the things that we had when we were kids, and even adults. Like, it's funny because we have, we probably have PCs or phones, or there's ports around, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
I played when I was streaming, I played Chrono Trigger on my PC, and I was like, I'm not I was like, I'm not going to play Chrono Trigger with an Xbox 360 controller. So I went out and I went to Amazon, I bought like a $5 USB like SNES controller, because I didn't know better. So I was like, I played it on an SNES, if you can hear the air quotes, controller. And that was the first time I ever played it. I didn't have an SNES when I was a kid. I was a Genesis kid.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I played Chrono Trigger on the original and the SNES until my battery died. And those batteries last a long time. Mm-hmm. My battery got wiped. I almost had all the endings. It was quite a thing to reminisce about. But
moment of silence for the Chrono Trigger battery.
Exactly. Now I know how to mod those batteries, and any time I start a new game, the battery's fresh. Even if the battery looks fresh, even if I test a battery and it's like super fresh, I have to make sure the battery's even fresher.
Yeah. I mean, this podcast is off the rails already. We talked about pretty much what we set out for in terms of the power couple idea that we started with, but I think I posted in the Discord, but there's a open source Game Boy cartridge reader that allows for save backups and writes, and I think it's like really inexpensive to get.
The cartridge reader?
And it's basically like, yeah, a cartridge reader that you plug in, it's USB into your computer. You can dump the save down. But yeah, just retro collecting. And, when I got my hands on DMG, I went on Mercari, because Mercari is an evil thing. I got my hands on Link's Awakening cartridge, and my son and I were playing through the Switch remake. And when I like put in the Game Boy, I turned it on, I was like, this is how Dad played this game. And he like couldn't care less. He was like, this looks so much better. And it's like, yeah, it does. It does. So anyways, let's do the color dungeon.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten there with my son. He's a lot younger than your son, but I look forward to those moments where his mom already trashes my retro collection because she's all about modern. So I try to do as much modern games as possible to get her into it. The latest was Animal Crossing. I don't play Animal Crossing. Then she got bored with it. A Game Boy I made for her got lost somewhere. Who knows where? We can't find it.
Oh my God.
It's a rare one too.
Oh no. Oh no.
Power
Let's
couples.
not talk about that.
Power couples.
Yeah, power couples. Yeah. But yeah. Anything else on your mind, my friend?
I think that's it, man. I am very enthusiastic for whatever modern games, whatever modern power couples come about. The latest one being Xbox and Microsoft and Nintendo, actually, with Banjo-Kazooie inside of Smash Brothers. That was a turning point for me. I didn't expect that, and I didn't see that sort of partnership until they started pushing Sony out and being like, hey, we're more inclusive. And Sony's like left behind because, Sony's going to be Sony. So Smash, I played Smash Brother or Smash 5, Smash 4, Smash 5. Very, very little, but them having Banjo-Kazooie was a breath of fresh air. I was so stoked that they partnered up.
You bring up an interesting point too that I didn't think about in this conversation, but for a while there, Nintendo and Microsoft were buddy in the cross multiplayer platform. Like,
what is it? Fortnite?
Pretty much, yeah, Fortnite. If you were on Sony, you could only play with
Sony,
your Sony friends, but Nintendo, PC and Xbox and even mobile, I think, could play completely together. And it was in that partnership that really forced Sony to play ball with cross-platform online multiplayer. Look at you, Retro, bringing it back around, getting this train back on track. Right at the end. I think that's a good point to close on. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to give it a rating on your platform of choice. I think iTunes still does stars, or whatever the cool kids call them these days.
Tell us what you like, listener. Tell us what you want to hear. Join our Discord.
It's a great place to talk. I am The Nerdy Dad. That is TheeNerdyDad. Joined by Retro.
I'm Eems. I go by Retro GM. Thank you for joining us, dear listener.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Be well.